Welcome to Starlight Talk. I'm here this week with Alex Attalla.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about her story this week. Super excited about that. Next week, we're going to have Ava and Ava Heron, is that how you say it? And we're going to talk about her coaching. What's it called? I'm blanking on what it's called.
Somatic.
Somatic coaching. So I'm excited about next week. So come back next week because I have these talks every week, Wednesdays at 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. SV says, hi ladies from Littleton. Oh, thank you for joining us.
From New Hampshire.
We have a couple people on Instagram. We're on Instagram this week. If you don't know me, please check out OurTism.com. I write about living on the spectrum on the blog. I have this talk every week on Wednesdays where I try to bring on guests and talk about anything related to autism. This week I have Alex, and we're going to talk about her story. Tomorrow we don't have a support group because it's Thanksgiving, but we will have another one then next Thursday for adults on the spectrum. So visit OurTism.com to register for that. What else? Well, I have an art show coming up. If you want to see more of me, if you go to my personal page, please come to my art show. There's more information on that. It's going to be at Michael's Learning Center, which is another great place that supports those on the spectrum. Judy says, well, Chloe, you cut your hair. I did. It's been a couple weeks now, maybe a month.
Almost, yeah. You cut it for your birthday.
Yeah. Hi, Randy. Thanks for joining. I love when you guys interact. So leave questions and comments throughout, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. All right. Let's get started. All right. So do you want to introduce a little bit about yourself, what you're doing right now?
Sure. So let me say my name again. I'm Alex, otherwise known as Taco to Chloe.
Because we met when she was really little, and like in elementary school, she wanted to be called Taco.
I had a taco phase. That was fun. I currently am a freshman enrolled at USC, studying sound design for theater. Let's see. I guess why I'm here, we'll start with that. I grew up in a foster home, but I was not a foster child myself. My mom owned the home, and we had 6 foster kids who would rotate in and out throughout my entire life. And then we moved out when I was 4 and moved into our own house. So that was me, my brother, two of my brothers, and then my parents. And then we kept the house that we used to live in, and that stayed as a group home for kids with disabilities. So I've basically grown up around people with autism and Down syndrome and being drug exposed my entire life. So I've gotten to learn how to live with varying personalities throughout my whole life. And then I worked there from the time I could basically walk until now. I still work there. Currently, we're trying to teach one of my foster siblings with cerebral palsy how to speak using his eyes because he can't move or talk. Let's see. What else?
So with that, I thought we'd talk a little bit about disabilities and a little bit about, because you have an invisible disability.
Yeah.
And you grew up with people with disabilities that like you can just see.
Yeah.
Where yours is more invisible, and there's a different, not that the struggles are easier or harder, but there's differences that come with that.
Yeah.
And I thought we'd address that a little bit. Because that's really interesting, and like people don't know the differences with that.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of ear issues, basically, that took a lot of my sense of hearing. Not enough that I can't hear people, but enough that it makes it difficult to understand people if I'm not trying. And I have a lot of joint and muscle pain that happens a lot too. So walking a lot is difficult and running a lot is difficult, and there's all of that fun stuff. So it's always been kind of interesting going out with my foster siblings who have cerebral palsy and who are in wheelchairs that obviously can't walk, and people know, and like I'm physically in pain and like helping them, and that's always been pretty interesting to deal with. But my mom figured it out, so it was fun. Yeah. We get almost each coast covered.
Yeah, I love seeing people from all different places come on. So you have some interesting stories too that I've heard a little bit from Lillian, and some from you about growing up with like this different kind of household. And like I know that like from everyone I've talked to, like who have such differences as a child, you don't know that it's different. Like you think that everyone lives like that. And so Lillian told me that one of the stories, how you were confused why all the foster siblings would come in and out. And you're like, when is it my time to leave?
Yeah, that was actually what my college essay was about. One time so like you obviously don't, when you're like a child, you don't comprehend that like no one else lives the way that you do. So in my brain, it was just like, oh, well, all of the young kids constantly leave and all of the adults are constantly coming in and out. So how come I'm always here? So my mom told me a story of how she was there was like 3 of us in the bath, and I was like 2 years old or 3 years old. And I asked her when it was my time to leave. And my mom was like, you don't really understand how to explain to a 3-year-old that like their living situation is not the norm. And like the first time I remember consciously being aware of that was like, I was in 3rd grade in elementary school, and we were at recess, and I was like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to my second house today. And like, they were like, you have 2 houses? Like I was utterly rich or something. And it was hilarious to me because that wasn't the case. It was the case that like I used to live there, but now I don't. I just go there all the time with my mom because she would take us along to work, as a lot of parents do. But like it was normal there because there were kids that we could play with. And it was just kind of interesting seeing like that, figuring out right then and there that, oh, I am the different person. Oh, what's ironic is I'm a sound design major. So the question is, how does your hearing situation impact your choice of major at college? Well, to me, it's always been like something that I've had to really, really focus on is listening to things. So even though I can't hear a lot of like if I were at a party, I would really only be able to hear the conversation that's happening with me. Like if someone were to call my name from across the room, I wouldn't hear them because I was focusing so hard on the person in front of me who's talking to me, trying to figure out what they're saying.
Which people with autism also have that, but it has nothing to do with like the hearing.
So I got to learn a lot of the variations between different instruments and music because I would focus so hard on trying to understand one piece of the music at a time in order to understand the whole, because it was really difficult to hear the whole song at once without getting confused about it. So to me, it's always just been like really interesting.
And we should address that deaf doesn't mean you can't hear anything. Blind doesn't mean you can't see anything. Yeah. Like
there's a spectrum.
It's like you're legally deaf,
blind or legally
deaf, and it can mean you hear a little bit, but it's impacting your life enough that you can consider yourself deaf,
legally blind or legally.
And so if you should talk to each person about like how, I don't know how to say it, how deaf they are, like which ways they like, maybe it's just some sounds they can't hear, maybe it's, it could be so many different things.
And with that too, there's also a lot of controversy within the deaf community about whether people who are technically, like according to medical documents, who are technically hard of hearing, do they belong in the deaf community or do they not? So that's also an issue there. Yeah.
And the deaf community is a completely different culture.
Yeah.
Because I did that was the language I took, and I was like, oh, it's just like they're the same, but they just like use their hands to talk. No, they they have different manners and different like it's a whole nother culture, and what's like you have to learn what is okay in that world. And so there's a lot of people who are deaf but don't like the deaf culture, and then there's people who like are hearing and love the deaf culture and want to be a part of it. So it's really interesting when you go into like those differences, because I have a deaf friend who would not learn sign language and not be part of the deaf culture because she doesn't like it.
Yeah. There's also a lot of deaf people who choose to lip read over getting an interpreter, or who willingly choose to get a cochlear implant so they can hear. Stuff like that happens a lot too. Yeah. Oh, but it impacted my choice of major at college because I was super interested in like looking at the wavelength, because it's a visual form, and seeing stuff very easily and understanding how that sounds just like seemed to naturally come to me. So it just like, now I get to do that for a living, and I get to make things sound good to other people, even if they don't sound amazing to me as a whole. So, yeah.
And it's really interesting. A lot of people are drawn to things that are really difficult for them. Like I know someone with cerebral palsy that wants to be a traditional artist. Like she draws with her hands. I
know someone with muscular dystrophy who's an author. That's what he does for a living. Yeah.
I mean, I have autism, and I did film for so long, which is a super sensory stimulating environment. If you've ever been on a film set, and it's like super long hours, super long days, the editing process is probably the best for like someone on the spectrum, because if you can hyper focus and you're like in a dark room by yourself, like that's great. But like there's other parts of the process that aren't as great, and like everyone loves shooting, and I'm like, but I love film. And so it's interesting how like people like find that passion, and it doesn't matter how hard it is. So like you're gonna run into challenges other people don't face, but you also come in with fresh eyes because you do have challenges and you do see things very differently, which will help you. Yeah. You know, and luckily it's a collaborative field.
Yeah. That's another thing, is like I found that working in technical theater, you're also involved in a lot of like load-ins and load-outs, which is a lot of heavy lifting, which is interesting for me because I have a lot of joint pain and bone pain. So that people like learn to see what you can and cannot do, and like they don't, at least in the environment that I was working in, they wouldn't push me too hard, and it would be more I was pushing myself, and they would always make sure that they were like there to help if they could understand.
Yeah, if you have a good team, they make sure that you're doing what is safe for you. And you should trust the people to explain, I can't lift these things, it hurts me, and like I can't do certain things, I need to take breaks, or whatever it is you need to do to stay healthy. So like if you're collaborating with other people, that's important to trust them.
A little bit.
And then you're also multilingual, which is really, really cool. How many languages do you speak?
There was at one point where I was fluent in 5, but I could like get along in 8 because I took Latin in school. So like I could read it and translate it, but I couldn't speak it. But yeah, that it also helped that I grew up in a foster home where I had a couple foster siblings who were deaf. So I was learning sign language along them to speak with them and to help me later on in life. And then my mom is from Mexico, and her whole side of the family speaks Spanish. And my dad is from Egypt, and his whole side of the family speaks Arabic. So there was also, and then in school I was learning English. So those were all, growing up, I was learning all 4 of those. Yeah. So that happened.
And I know just like autism can almost be a different language with trying to communicate with people. And like with autism, a lot of us have our own definitions of things that are very dictionary based, where other people are like, I sort of understand what this means. And we'll say something, we're like, wait, I don't understand what you're saying. So like coming from having known so many languages and trying to communicate. That must have been really difficult.
Yeah, it was really interesting when I was younger because there's a specific memory that I have in preschool where there was a mom who didn't speak Spanish, even though a lot of the kids spoke Spanish and the teacher spoke Spanish. So like when the kids would go back and forth between English and Spanish, most people would understand and they would figure it out. But there was this one particular mom, and I was asking her if I could get another juice box. But half of my sentence was in English, and then part of it was in Spanish, and then I didn't know the word for juice box in English or in Spanish, so I said it in Arabic. So this poor woman had no idea what I was saying, and I got very, very, very frustrated and had a temper tantrum so bad that they had to call my mom, and my mom was the only one who could like calm me down because she knew what was happening. She was like, "Oh, she just wanted a juice box." And they were like, "Oh," and then I got my juice box and I was happy. But yeah, there was a lot of frustrations growing up until I could learn to decipher that, oh, these people I can speak this with, and these people I can speak this with, and these people have to speak this with. So yeah.
I know it's very common for those who know multiple languages and are around those that have accents to have to go to speech class and then also being deaf on top of that. I'm sure, like, I understand not being able to pronounce things correctly as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, I know the word, but it came out all different. It not only came out in multiple languages, but I didn't say the word correctly either.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily have speech classes because the speech classes were more reserved for, I don't actually know why I didn't get speech classes, but I didn't. I got language classes where I would get pulled out of class in kindergarten and first grade, and a teacher would, or a professional would ask me, like, what is the word for this in this language? And she'd hold up a pencil and be like, say this in English. And then I would say it in Spanish, and it was a lot of like, no, with me, you say it in English. With her, you say it in Spanish. Or with this person, you say it in Spanish. So it was a lot of like, basically teaching me how to figure out when I could use which language. Yeah.
And it's really cool you were able to speak so early, because a lot of people who know multiple languages actually are delayed in actually talking because they're like, this is a lot.
Yeah, I didn't actually speak for a couple weeks in preschool and kindergarten, but then once I started, they couldn't really stop me, so I would get moved around the classroom a lot because I didn't understand that, oh, I cannot speak all the time whenever I want. So yeah, that was a fun time.
Well, I had selective mutism, so that wasn't an issue. But like, I understand not getting rules, especially if it's not like, hey, right now you guys can't speak, right? So like, I remember when I would be bored in class in elementary school, they had like those libraries in the class. I just get up and go grab a book, and like no one really said anything to me because they're like, oh, she's probably just done with her work, you know? Where no, I wasn't. So I totally get, like, no one explained to me that like you have to do this first, and then you can go get a book when you're finished, and like definitely not during my lecture. Like that was not explained. Like they don't say it outright. Everyone just sort of already knew. And, so yeah, I totally get that. Just like. And then you're in trouble. You're like, why am I in trouble? Can you explain? Well, you know why you're in trouble. Well,
no, I don't actually.
Why would I ask that?
Yeah.
Let's see. So, can you talk about like some things you learned about how to approach those with disabilities that we can teach others?
Well, for like the less visible disabilities, like I learned a lot I had one very specific foster sibling when I was really little who I actually like figured this out because I was trying to cut, as children do, I was trying to cut my own hair with scissors, but I wanted to try it out on him first. And he had a very severe form of autism where he couldn't really communicate, and anything would cause him, like, the wrong texture would cause a sensory overload, or too bright lights, or just in his own home where he was supposed to be comfortable with, that would happen a lot too. And so like trying to go and cut his hair freaked him out, and he crawled under a crib, which like back in 2004 time was like literally less than a foot and a half of space, and he crawled under there to get away from me, and I was like, no, I'm coming for you. And so my mom sat me down and explained to me that like there are some people who you have to be careful how you approach. And so I learned pretty early on that like everyone is different and everyone has different things that they can and cannot control and that they can and cannot deal with. And so there was a lot of times especially in elementary school in like 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, where there would be a lot of kids who would make fun of the special ed class that we had. And a lot of the kids there had like Down syndrome or just nonverbal autism, stuff like that. And they were just kind of like, kids would make fun of them. And growing up around that, I knew a lot of kids who I was close to who were also like that. So I would defend them and go up to them. And most of my friends were the kids in the special ed class because I could understand how to approach them without scaring them, basically. And I kind of always prided myself on that. So growing up around those kinds of kids when I was younger helped a lot. Growing up to like, I feel, help other kids feel included.
And so you had a lot of the really young kids, which is an age where you already don't know how to communicate, and then having a disability on top of that can make it really frustrating. And you get a lot of kids with anger and a lot of kids with, with meltdowns and outbursts. And so I'm sure you were more used to that kind of thing in your home than other people.
Yeah, especially because my parents ended up adopting one of the foster kids that they had, who they just fell in love with, I guess. And so he was adopted when he was 4 years old. He lived in the home from basically when he got out of the hospital. And then my parents legally adopted him when he was 4, and he's obviously still my brother today. But like growing up with him too, always around me. So it's not just whenever my mom would take me to the facility. It's like always I had a brother who he doesn't understand a lot of like communication issues, and he's very, very, very trusting. So he doesn't understand when people are taking advantage of him. So he gets really frustrated really easily too. So there's also that I would live with. That was a life lesson every day.
You had the story about that kid who couldn't quite eat, but like the sensory of having food in their mouth, and you like gave him lemon one day, which he loved.
He loved the lemon. Yeah, we would give him like Ritz crackers, and he would lick the salt off of it. But he didn't know how to swallow, and his stomach really couldn't handle food inside of it. So like we would give him crackers and like lollipops, and eventually a lemon, which was hilarious because he made the ugliest face, and then he was like, "Oh, this is actually good," and then he just kept licking it, kept making the same mistakes. But yeah, we would give him stuff, and he would lick it, and then it would end up everywhere, and he would just like crawl into it, and it was kind of hilarious. But he would sit down at the dinner table with us because he wanted to feel included, and scream until we gave him a cracker or something that he could just lick. And like, yeah, that was funny.
So yeah, even with like, if you can't eat, like you still want to feel included. Like the disability community. He
was young too, and the fact that from 3, 4, he wasn't even 4, he was like 2 or 3 when we had him. He wanted to feel included.
Yeah, so you just, even though they can't participate in the same way, like those of us in the disability community still want to be involved. And so like with my like delayed reaction, and I don't mean like card games and like stuff like that where you have to like hit the pile like spoons and stuff, but I want to feel included. And so I'll sit down and I'll talk with my friends who are playing, and we'll hang out. Like I don't want to play because it's not fun, but I want to feel included. And so like there's kids who literally can't eat, but they want to sit at the dinner table while you eat and feel included. So if they're just licking a lemon, that's okay.
It's a way to include them,
And so like I'm sure you have a lot of stories like that where like people wanted to feel included and you figured it out.
Eventually, it took a while. Yeah, especially with like our 4 and 5-year-olds who couldn't actually express what they wanted, especially in regards to like TV shows and movies. So it was a lot of trial and error of like, what do you want and what is it that this means? So yeah.
I'm glad you're sharing this information. I think my son, high functioning. It's taken 24 years for him to feel comfortable accepting and returning a hug. Oh, hugs are interesting.
I don't like hugs. I don't like physical contact, so I can understand
I don't
that.
like skin-on-skin contact,
Yeah.
but I like deep pressure therapy. So like a hug can feel good when I really want it, but when I don't want to be touched at all, it doesn't feel good. So I'm sure he just figured out, okay, now is okay when I can hug. And it's so nice. Just, it makes me even more comfortable to accept a hug when someone asks first.
Yeah.
Rather than it's surprise. Because again, I can't really read body language. Yeah. So even when you think you're telling me, you're not telling me unless you straight out say, I'm about to give you a hug right now.
Yeah.
So just like the surprise of it is jarring.
Yeah.
So I've had people that have figured that out and like they're like, oh, is it appropriate for me to give you a hug right now? And I'm like,
yeah. My brother, his name is Anthony, who is adopted. He just turned 22, like on Monday. And he still does not understand that our tiny 2-pound chihuahua cannot handle being treated like a pit bull. We have had her for 11 years, and his brain still cannot wrap around the fact that she is 2.5 pounds and can break under his weight. So that's something he's still trying to learn, that my mom constantly drills into his head. So, yeah, I get that.
You know, we have 4 dogs in our house, and the really big dogs are more claustrophobic and don't like the hugs and the laying on them and that kind of stuff. But the little dogs love it. They love being squeezed and love being touched all the time. And and I'm sure it's different with every dog. I'm sure there's big dogs that love being laid on or laying on you and that kind of thing.
That's her.
Yeah. But ours just happen to not enjoy that at all. So like, and they tell you really quickly, I don't like this. And so like, it's really interesting how people listen to that, but when a kid's like straight out saying, I don't want to be hugged, and you just ignore it.
Yeah. I've told people that because I don't like being hugged at all. It's a really weird thing for me. And especially in high school, people would be like, oh, you're just joking, and then go in for the hug and then be surprised when I would hit them back. So
depending on your mood, it can like be really upsetting and turn on that fight or flight where you're like, no, right? And then it's like, well, that's your fault. Like, no, what? It's your fault for I said no and you crossed the boundary anyway.
Yeah.
Comment, question.
The reverse, how can you make a child feel comfortable at the table?
Oh, I've had a couple of those where we had a lot of, we get a lot of kids from like other foster homes that would just be sat in their high chairs all day. So getting put in the high chair was like a form of PTSD for them, I guess, because they would just cry and scream and like kick and would not want to be put in there because in their old home, it meant that they were there for the entire day and they couldn't get out and do anything. So like even the little boy that ended up sitting down with a table at us, he would get sat in the high chair and then he wouldn't be let down all day. So we adjusted his feeding pump to make it so it was a carryable backpack that we would put on him, and then he could do whatever he wanted. Eventually he like learned that the high chair wasn't a bad place. So I guess it's just like all of the times that we've had to make them feel comfortable sitting around the table, it's been like figuring out what they were uncomfortable with.
And I think it depends on the age of a child. Like if you're expecting a 5-year-old to sit at the table for an hour, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Where if it's an adult, like you can expect they can probably handle sitting there
Yeah.
longer. So like, and finding out what's comfortable for them. I know for me, I need a soft seat for my booty. That's important. And so when I'm in a place that has a hard chair, I want to get up a lot faster. If the temperature's not right, and like all those kind of things. Yeah. But it's really like just about making that person feel comfortable at the table. So if they want to just sit down for a little bit,
Yeah.
then like be like, okay, be grateful that they sat down for 5 minutes, and like do it a little bit at a time,
Yeah.
so that they don't feel like, okay, now once I sit down, I have to be there for an hour.
Yeah. Because it becomes a source of dread too if it's like a forcible thing.
Yeah, and environment's really important. So if there's a table and chairs already associated with bad memories, maybe get new tables and chairs.
Yeah.
You know, so that it start fresh. If you're talking about like food, like sitting out having dinner and they're picky eaters, I would say get them involved in cooking and make it fun. Just make it fun, because if it's fun, then it's not going to be a battle, right? If it's like you have to sit up properly and you have to talk about this and you can't talk
Elbows
about that,
touch
and
the table
and you have to eat this much, then it's not fun.
Yeah.
It's like
it becomes a chore. No one wants to do chores.
So, I mean, there are kids that like that, but like,
that's true.
But know who it is that you're working with, and like make them comfortable. That would be my best advice. I hope that helps. Tommy says, I have a 17-year-old son on the spectrum. He isn't driving yet, but soon will be. That is great, because I don't drive. I have no plans to drive. I took one lesson. I got my permit, took a lesson, and went, it's not for me. So I have no worry about his ability, as he does well in everything he tries. I do worry about him getting pulled over by law enforcement that may or may not know how to approach him. The fear of the event might cause him to react strangely. If you're worried about that, I would take him to your police department near you. Say he has autism. Do you know how to interact with someone with autism? Have him meet some of the police officers. You know, like get him exposed and like go through the process and be like, okay, what would you do in this situation? You know?
Yeah.
And
I remember Lillian got pulled over once when I was in the car with her.
That was pretty bad.
That was pretty bad.
They didn't believe. Yeah, tell the whole story.
Okay, so I don't remember where we were coming back from, but Lillian was driving me somewhere. I think I was like 14 or 15. Lillian had her license for well over a year.
Lillian's my twin sister with autism, by the way.
Yeah, that should be
in case you didn't know, I have a twin sister who also has autism.
Yeah, I'm also friends with Lillian. So we were in the car coming back from somewhere, and Lillian didn't have her headlights on. So, and apparently it was the end of the month, and the police department in the area was trying to reach quota, was like what he ended up telling us. So he pulled us over and was like, can I see your license, please? And then he was like, well, you haven't had this license for a year. You're not legal to be driving someone under the age of 18. And I was 14 or 15, so she was 18. Oh, and she was 18. So that also like excludes that law. And so,
yeah, but I remember she lost her license and got a new one. So she did have it for a year, just that not particular one.
But Lillian couldn't express that at the time because she was like really overwhelmed. So she got on the phone with her mom, and her mom went on, the cop came back after checking the license and was like telling me that I needed to call my dad to come and pick me up in like the middle of nowhere Manhattan Beach. And
your parents were out of town.
Right? And my parents were out of town. I was with a babysitter who didn't have a car, and it was just a mess. And so Lillian's mom was on the phone, and we put her on speaker, and she explained to the officer that like Lillian definitely had her license for over a year. She was also 18, and that Lillian lost her license. And then he went back and he checked and was like, oh yeah, my mistake. Sorry guys, no ticket. Just turn your headlights on. That's a huge mistake. Bye. And we just sat there for like 5 minutes, both completely like, what the heck just happened? And like, I just remember being in complete shock, and Lillian was definitely in way more shock. And she couldn't express herself at all to the cop or even to me. And we were just like, call your mom. And she pulled out her phone and called her mom. Yeah, that was an interesting day.
And I was in Boston.
Yes, that was also a thing.
Yes.
Yeah, Lillian's mom was in Boston. Way out of town. So it was a fun day for all. But there was no ticket, so.
Yeah, that was crazy. I remember, I don't know why I was like listening to the call. I was with you, and Lillian was like, they want Taco to go to the station and be picked up from there, and her parents are out of town and won't be back for a week, and I don't want her staying overnight there.
Yeah,
and she was like, oh my goodness, what do I do?
Yeah.
I remember her being in such a panic and not knowing what to do. But it got resolved, you know. But yeah, I would say like so you see, you can call someone in that situation, and like there's what?
There are the banners that go over your seatbelt that say I have autism.
Yeah, and there's cards that like you can have in your wallet and pull it out and say, that will say I have autism.
Oh,
there's the necklaces, you know. There's
like,
like,
banners or sashes that go over the seatbelt that say I have autism. I have a sticker on my license that says that I'm hard of hearing. So if I get a license pulled out because I wasn't listening to the cop sirens or something, that I have that. There's also stickers that you can put places for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I hope that's helpful. For him, conversation, eye contact. Yes, great point. Yeah. So if he just like somehow brings up he has autism, then like they should know about the eye contact and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully that helps. I don't know what to tell you if it happens out of town or something.
Yeah.
But I would definitely go to your local police station because he'll probably drive around your town the most, right? And go talk to them about it.
Yeah. Law enforcement can be very understanding. The police department and the fire department, whenever there's like a natural disaster that happens near the facility, they always come and check on us first because we live right next to them. So they're pretty understanding when they can be.
Yeah. So if you have any more questions, we'd love to answer them.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. Do you have any more stories?
I don't know. Do I? It depends on the topic. There's so many stories.
School stories?
School stories. Oh boy. Let's see. Okay, so the same little boy who we would give him crackers and stuff to lick around. I can't legally say his name, that's why I keep describing. We'll call, what can we call him? I don't know, some name.
James.
We'll call him James. He was very, very, very frustrated in school because he was in a classroom, he was in a special needs classroom with all nonverbal wheelchair-bound kids. And he was a very active, very hyper little boy who was also very, very, very intelligent. And he hated school with a passion. And so it became a battle of like trying to get the school to understand that his disability wasn't like all of the kids in his classroom. And so he needed to be put in a place that was more understanding of him rather than just fitting him where there was the least amount of kids. And the school fought us on it until we eventually just pulled him out of that school and like didn't send him into school and had to go through this place called Westside Regional Center, which is like a local place that takes all of our kids. And they help us find like early start programs and stuff like that. And we were like contacting the regional school area and like Lako School District, which handles the school that he goes to. And it was just like a huge fight about trying to get him, like, we can't have this little boy hating school because you guys won't accommodate him. And eventually we got him into a different school that was like more fitting to his needs. He was in a classroom with all super hyper kids and he just ended up loving it. So hating school had nothing to do with the fact that he just didn't like school. It had to do with the fact that he didn't appreciate the environment he was in because he couldn't express who he wanted to express.
You also went to an interesting school, right?
Are you talking about my middle school? My tiny little
Yes.
tiny, yeah. Yeah, that was also, I am super, super into animals. I love animals. And school was really, really sucky for me because it was really boring and we weren't doing anything. And my school wasn't very good. My teacher was amazing, my last teacher that I had, but I just didn't like it. And both of my brothers had hated the middle school that I was going to end up going to. And so we ended up finding this tiny little middle school called Star Prep Academy. And it was inside of this little place called the Eco Station. And it was an exotic animal rescue. And so the classes that we had, it was a very small school. It was grades 6 through 12. There was a max of I had 6 kids in my 6th grade class, 8 in my 7th grade class, and then 14 in my 8th grade class. So it was each classroom had a max of 10 kids. So they ended up splitting my 8th grade class into 2 different classes. And it was just I loved that school so much, and I didn't actually want to leave, but I didn't really have a choice in the matter towards the end. But being able to be around animals constantly and take eco classes, which is what they call them, where we would go in and we would volunteer and we would cut up food for the animals and learn about all of the animals that they had. They had a monitor lizard and named Dog that we would put a harness on and walk him around the school. But he was a monitor lizard, so he was really slow, but it would take the whole class period to walk 30 feet, but it was great. So that was a really, really fun place to be. Especially because if you ever wanted to escape for a minute, I guess you could I need to go to the chinchilla room and hold a chinchilla. So you could do that. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love those untraditional kind of places for school, because so many school environments, especially for those with a disability, feel so close in, and you have to follow these rules and this structure.
There's no escape.
With disabilities, especially when you're atypical or someone who doesn't quite fit in with they can't sit there all day and just listen to a lecture. You could have, if you have PTSD, you could be triggered by something. You could have a sensory overload. There's so many things that could happen where you need to step out. If you have pain in your body, if you have pain in your mental health, there's so many reasons that someone would need to step out and take a break. And so when school accommodates that and actually says, oh, here's a room you can go to with therapy animals. With weighted blankets and toys and fidgets, and you can run around and you can play if you need to, or you can write, or you can draw, take a nap.
That's something that I've seen too when I go visit my foster siblings at school. We've had a couple of kids who have been older, who've been 6 or 7, and they're still at the same school, but this one teacher had a little corner that was, I forget what she called it, but it was the calm down corner or the quiet corner or whatever. And whenever someone was frustrated or upset, or they just needed to be alone for a second, it was this tiny little secluded area in the back. And all that was required for them to go back there was to put a little check-in bear with a paper clip on the emotion that they were feeling, so the teacher would know how to approach them to make sure that they were okay. And it was filled with weighted blankets and a Bobo doll that they could hit and kick if they needed to. And it was just a quiet area that I was I wish I had that to escape. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, in one of the earlier live streams, my grandma worked at a preschool, and there was a kid who probably had ADD, but so he would need to let out energy once in a while, and so you could tell when he couldn't pay attention and was having struggle, and so she would just go outside and run a few laps and come back. And then he would be able to sit and pay attention. And other teachers oh, the other kids are going to feel it's unfair that he can go leave the classroom. And she's no, the other kids tell me he needs to go run because he's disturbing the class, and they all want to learn. And they loved my grandma and the way she taught, because she was accommodating to everyone like that.
Yeah.
And so when you do things that are that,
out of the norm, which is weird because it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. When everyone's different and needs different things, so when you have a space, like for someone who needs a quiet space, a space for someone who needs to run around and let some energy out.
Yeah.
If you have a bad day, like you can still go to school, you know, where like, I feel like today, like those kids would just stay home.
Yeah.
And like not want to go to school.
School becomes a punishment.
Yeah. And they would have need way more mental health days because they didn't get their 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, if it was just 5 minutes every day, they could pay attention, you know? But instead it becomes like I have to stay home for a week because I wasn't able to get any of my energy out or any of.
Or kids getting suspended from school because they
Yeah,
can't sit
because
still
they
or
literally
quiet.
can't. They literally can't. It's not a choice.
Yeah.
They literally can't anymore. So it's really cool. And I've heard a lot of teachers now are getting rid of desks and like putting tables and couches and all those kind of things in the room because there's so many people who are getting PTSD who can't go into a classroom without going,
Yeah.
Bad memories associated with all of them.
Yeah.
And so they're needing to change the way a classroom physically looks.
Yeah.
Because it's affecting their students so much, especially as they get to high school and college. And so they're like, oh, we'll just change the classroom so it doesn't look like a classroom. And that is helping kids. It's like, well, then maybe you need to change
something else. Yeah.
If the kids don't like being in a classroom,
yeah,
then things need to change, you know? So moving away to college, question mark.
You can answer that one better than I can.
And Richard has a fully formed question about that.
So are you still living at home helping foster kids? I missed that if you said that.
I moved in on August 15th to USC to my dorm. But I come home basically every weekend, and my mom goes over there every weekend because she loves the place, and I love it too. And so I did move in, and I stopped like actually working there, like full shifts with my mom in August. But I do still go and volunteer like I've always done. And it's right now it's just a lot of teaching my one specific foster brother who we've had since he was 3 months old, and now he's 10. Teaching him how to speak using his eyes is what we're focusing on right now. Yeah.
Have you seen that colleges are pretty accommodating to people with Asperger's, extra time on test copy notes, etc.? It seems like my professors didn't know what to do. I would say it really depends on the school, so I would look into that before going to the school. I went to 2 different schools, and the first school I went to was very accommodating with that sort of area, but lacked in other areas, which is why I switched. And then I switched to a school that was not at all accommodating, but was better in those other areas.
Yeah.
So it like really depends on what you need and really research that. But I would say overall, the school environment is not created for someone who is atypical or disabled. It's just not. And so keeping that in mind when you go there, I've really felt since I've not been in school that my mental health has really so much improved. I am having a much better time working than I ever did at school. And so I would take that into account. If your kid is not turning in homework, it does not mean that they're not able to turn in their work.
Yeah.
In a job environment, it is so different because the reason why I don't like ABA is the same reason I don't like school, is they use the same methods. Yeah. It's all about reward and punishment, even though it's like not literally hitting the kid. Yeah. It's like, you're gonna earn a grade, or I'm gonna take that grade away, I'm gonna give you a point, or I'm gonna take a point away.
Yeah.
And it becomes so competitive, and it's like, oh, everything's about that A, when it really should. It's not actually about learning. Yeah. It's just like getting the
sure
points.
You get the points to get the grade. Yeah.
And so like I feel like I could have written much better papers, but it's like I need this requirement and this requirement and this requirement to get the points.
Yeah.
Where now that I'm just able to write whatever I want, I have these articles that are changing people's lives, and these scripts that like people love. Where like in the classroom environment, when I was writing these things, I felt so restricted that I felt like I couldn't do my best work, where like if I were to work on a film, of course, like it's gonna be restricting, as like you need to use these characters and you need to, write about this topic, and it can be like that, but like that's way more fun than, well, you need to have it 5 pages and it needs to be like this and it needs 12-point font and and it needs to include this much information about this topic, and the thesis has to be in the second sentence, and like
this is how you write a thesis. It's this, and this.
And that's not how writing is. That's not how like history is. Like it's not restricting like that. Like there's
even formal papers like, that people publish, scientists publish, are not written the way that they make high schoolers and college students write papers.
And it's like so many things are subjective, where even in math,
I know.
It's like, well, you didn't do it the right way, but I got the right answer, so points off.
You need to have this formula and show these steps.
I had teachers that were like, never use pen, others didn't care, use this type of pencil, use grid paper, use this, it's just where it's not, I feel like it's not as much like that in the work environment. I mean, you're still gonna have like crazy bosses who like put your staple here and like that kind of stuff, but like you can also choose to get a different job. You can also choose,
we're changing colleges is not as easy.
It's not, and especially if you're limited to in high school to like you have to be at this public school. It's not, you can try to change classes, but that's not always easy.
An option.
Or an option.
My high school was very not accommodating to the requests that I'd made, but my college gave them to me almost as soon as I asked for them. And they gave me more than what I asked for. So I found that my school was very accommodating. It does help that my major is very, very tiny. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Chloe. It does help that I am the only one in my technical major. So my classes are all very small. So my teachers are also very understanding if I can like find the courage to talk to them. But yeah.
So I hope that answers your question. I feel like I'm saying that to every question, but like these things can be so complex that like if you can narrow it down to like exactly what you need and want from the school, we can probably answer that better than just accommodations. And I know like that even it feels specific, but it's not.
And like we can only speak for what our schools did. Your best bet is probably calling like the disability office for the school.
Going in, looking at it, talking to people who have been there, really talking to kids that don't work at selling the school is probably the like they give you a ticket when you go toward the school. They give you a ticket to go to the lunchroom. Go talk to people in that room. That is your best option for learning about a school. Honestly, they're gonna tell you the truth, and every school has its cons, and they're gonna be like, yeah, we don't have this, but we have this, and like there's a reason why they're still there. And they're gonna tell you what that is. And if you don't like those kids, or if you don't like that what they're telling you, it's probably not the right school. Most schools have a type of person that's drawn to it in college. So like when you're talking to them and you're like, this is not, I'm not vibing, you just choose a different school because it's interesting. The schools I've been to, like they were all such different people that were drawn there.
And also letting your child physically go to the school as well is a huge thing. Because I know people who go to my school who never actually set foot on the campus until they moved in, and they dropped their programs. They are dropping next semester. So that's also a huge thing.
It's pretty scary that how real that statistic is, that like 50 to 60% of freshmen drop out. That is real. That is accurately what happened after my freshman year. But I don't know if they transferred. I don't know if they just left, took a gap year. because they weren't ready. I don't know, but at least half of my grade left, and it had nothing to do with disabilities. It's just like the school environment is not a great environment.
Especially if it's not a school that like you feel like you fit in with. Yeah,
if it's not, and especially if it's not the right school for you.
Yeah.
My son's school allows him to go out on the playground and get on the swing for a bit. It makes a huge difference. That's amazing.
Go school.
Oh, I love stimming on the swing. Oh my god. There was a swing at one of my colleges, and I was there for like 3 hours one day, and like my legs killed me the next day. It was so worth it. I was there like in the snow, in the rain, and there was like me and one other kid. He was there all the time, and we like bonded over that swing.
Great.
And people were like, "Why are you going all the way to the swing in the snow?" And I'm like, "Cause I need to stim. Like, leave me alone." My son is undiagnosed, but functions so high. You both are helping so much. Oh, thank you. Thank you for all your questions. Like, it's great. So great. It's so great. Glad you brought up mental health. It seems to raise anxiety in my son. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you two are describing my frustration as a young woman who failed high school and left in 9th grade.
Oh, yeah.
I know people who left high school.
I almost left high school. My saving grace was technical theater. We've got a
there was a time in my life where I didn't think I was going to graduate high school. So
I might have to rescue my dog for a second. Layla, come here. Sorry, service dog issues. There we go.
We have service dogs.
Okay, she's good for the most part.
Yeah, because we need him for our mental health.
True.
I have a whole live stream on service dogs if you want to check it out with a service dog trainer. All right, so where did we leave off?
9th grade.
In 9th grade. Yeah, so I feel like people like are very judgmental of someone who held back a grade or dropped out for whatever reason. But it's like, if someone got really sick, like had cancer or something, you like obviously then you wouldn't leave
question
school.
it. Yeah.
But if you have a mental health problem or atypical problem or disability problem, like that's an equally valid reason to leave school.
I'm out of school a lot because especially when it gets cold over here, it gets really, really hard to like get up and walk across campus to school. So like if you get teachers that understand that and who will send you your work, it's great. But I also have a teacher who's like, well, you're failing my class. And I'm like, great. So
yeah, there's
that's also a thing.
So many policies in different classes that, you only get 3 absences.
Yeah.
That doesn't always work.
Yeah.
I was like, well, hopefully no one gets sick. Because that's all 3 of my absences. Like, it's crazy. So you can only get sick once.
Yeah, basically.
That's it. If you hurt yourself or need a mental health day or someone in your family dies,
sorry,
you're gonna fail your class. It's crazy. And there's a lot of professors who are accommodating, like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But then there's others who like take that so seriously.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, if you miss one more class, you're failing.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So like talk to your professors and get to know them and drop those classes really early that have not understanding professors.
Yeah.
Talk to peers who have been in those classes who can tell you which ones they are.
Rate my professor also.
Yes.
Rate my professor is a saving grace in college, surprisingly.
Because in college, you can choose your courses.
Yeah.
So do your research and like take advantage of that you get to pick your courses, unlike high school.
Yeah.
Take advantage of that. But the professor, I would say, is really important. Yes, you may love what they're teaching, but if you don't vibe with the professor, it's not going to work.
And it's not going to be a fun class.
No. I barely passed high school, but I think the anxiety of school hierarchy is part of it.
I get that.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say. It's just like
a thing.
For me, like, the way I got through it is like, oh, I'm gonna kick myself if I don't keep trying to go as far as I can.
Yeah.
And then I ended like the last day of school. I was like, I finished.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I did it. It's already over.
So I feel the first semester's almost over. I have a week left, and it's like, oh, I actually got through this.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about in my RTE vlog about how time changes depending on how deep in defense mode you are, depression and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so when your mental health is loose, then your time changes, and it's like you can only live in the now, and now it's forever.
And when people are like,
so when you complete something, you're like, oh my God, I completed it. I didn't realize. When everyone around you is like, yeah, you were like this close.
Yeah.
Like, and like we saw you.
Or when people are like, it'll pass, it's fine, just think of how good it'll be when
you're
you're
like,
done. It's like you're only thinking of the certain time.
Yeah.
That you're in. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, tomorrow's your last day. And you're like, yeah, I get it. But then the day happens, you're like, oh wait, this was my last day. Like everyone's like, yeah, we've been counting down the days.
Yeah.
Like, well, I only live in the present, so. Okay, we'll start wrapping up, but we have one more question here. How does online classes work for you? For me, it worked great. I have not done online classes, and honestly, I couldn't see myself being motivated to do that.
Yeah.
But I know people who love doing that. There were options at my first school to take all in class, some online, or all online for different courses, and there were people who really loved that online option and were able to complete it so fast. They got it done in a few weeks, and we're like, I have so much free time now.
Yeah.
I would have just put it off and not done it.
I also can't really. It's really hard for me to read off of a computer. So like when teachers, especially now, teachers are all like, read this assignment online that I posted, I always end up printing it out anyway and reading it because I can't look at a computer screen for very long. So focusing on an online class wouldn't work for me either.
Yeah. I did, like, we had a health class that was all online. Hated it. Because we had to do, like, for both schools, before I went and lived on campus, you had to do, like, what was it? It was, like, about drinking and about...
Oh, yeah, we had to do those, too.
They're awful. I did not want to do it, and there are people that didn't even complete it, and were able to somehow still live on campus because they were like, you won't be able to live here. It's not true. Then I think they just made them take a course that first week. Like they had to go to the course.
They locked our registration for the next semester if we didn't complete them.
Oh,
yeah,
that's different.
Yeah.
So it depends on your school.
And you.
They're usually pretty good. Yeah. I did the online one at my first school, and then we also had to do one when we got to school. And I was like, we learned all this on the online thing.
Ew.
It sucked, but we did it. So I'm sure your actual classes would be more interesting because you chose them.
Yeah.
But for me, that was really, really painful and would not recommend it. But if it works for you, happy for you. Do what works, not what everyone tells you to do. Do what works. Honestly, that is probably the best advice I can give you. So if college works for you, do college. If college does not work for you, then don't do it. There's other alternatives.
Yeah.
So hopefully you learned something
like
today because we were trying. Yeah, we were trying to educate.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling your story, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
Please let me know if you want Alex on again. She's great.
I had fun.
And, yeah.
Oh, thanks.
It was very enjoyable to hear your stories.
Thanks.
You gave some great advice. I'm not able to talk anymore. It's Thanksgiving tomorrow.
Food.
So happy Thanksgiving.
Next week, your guest is.
Next week, we're gonna have Ava on, and I already forgot what she's gonna talk about, but it's gonna be great. Somatic coaching. Somatic therapy. That'll be next week, so come back. I do these live streams every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Check out my blog, OurTism.com. I write about living on the spectrum. I met someone who read my blog who was like, I know you. And I was like, and that was really great. So, so he recommends it to you guys. I don't remember his name. I'm sorry if you're watching this. I'm trying. What else? We don't have support group tomorrow, obviously. It's Thanksgiving. I already mentioned that. Happy Thanksgiving again. I'm thankful that you watched. I have my art show.
November 30th.
Yes, November 30th and December 1st. At Michael's Learning Center place. No, center. It's a center. Yeah, I'm linked on the description. Go to Call Estelle, and there's all the information somewhere on there. Or you could go to Michael's Learning. And anything you have coming up?
No,
nothing. Don't check out Alex.
My Facebook page is just me and some occasional pictures of my foster siblings. So if you want to see their faces, some of them are on there.
Check out Alex. She's a great story. I sent her so many emails. All right. Thank you for watching.
Thanks.
Come back next week. Stay colorful.
Yay. Bye.
Bye-bye.